I'm going to be talking about why I prefer to use coquette instead of doelet. The sun is setting, so the lighting may dip off. Side note, I look really pretty today. I'm not cutting that out either. Anyways, my first reason is the creators themselves said that Doelet was a trauma victims only aesthetic. Cool, whatever, but where does that leave the girls who are not trauma victims who would enjoy being in the aesthetic, who enjoy Dolores's clothes, who enjoy the cinematography and the aesthetics of the movie? Where does that leave them? Another reason is coquette, for some strange reason, by them has been said to be overtly sexual. They use the dictionary version of the word coquette to say that it's overtly sexual. I think that's strange because as someone who's in the aesthetic, you would think they would know that dictionary definitions do not always mean what a word actually is. For instance, in the original nymphet term, we know that the dictionary version is not the actual meaning of the aesthetic that we choose. So if we can understand that, then why can't we understand that with the word coquette either? That was very strange to me. Because coquette was created not as a sexual term, but as a reference to a type of female film character that was popular in the golden age of Hollywood around the time Dolores was growing up. Characters like Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It Hot, or Rita Hayworth and Glenda, I believe those could be considered both. Well, Glenda I feel like was more in the femme fatale / coquette type of character, but they were just a type of film character that I would think that Dolores would have liked. That's how we came up with the term. Similar to how girls this day and age idolize Megan Fox and the character of Jennifer Check and want to be like her, that's how we basically chose the term for coquette, because it was just a character type that we think Dolores would have really identified with and found herself idolizing. It had nothing to do with any sexual or flirtatious connotations. It was just a reference to her and her interests. And the doelet aesthetic, for some reason, seems really focused on only talking about Dolores and her trauma. And the nymphet aesthetic really never talked about Dolores and her trauma because it was not focused on that. It was more focused on her before homework came along, or just her in her fleeting moments of happiness. It was more about being happy and carefree than really focusing on trauma and trauma only. And I personally do not think it's healthy to do that, because after a while you get in this echo chamber of only trauma, and I feel like doing something like that and aestheticizing trauma is very similar to how Pro-Ana is, because Pro-Ana will always say they were pro-recovery, just how like Trauma Core said that they are pro like recovery. But we can still recognize that you're surrounding yourself with constant negativity, but that is like a whole nother video. But the reason why I mention that is because of how the doelet aesthetic is so focused on trauma. It isolates people who are not traumatized and would simply like to enjoy the aesthetic. And when you do something like that, it leaves a lot of people displaced. It leaves a lot of people feeling that they don't belong, and I don't think that's right, because the creator of Doelet has garnered almost a cult-like mentality, and I don't think she realizes it. And if she realizes it, I think she simply does not care and is hiding under a facade of, I'm extremely nice and I'm also a traumatized person, so therefore you cannot criticize me, which I don't think is okay. She tells girls they can and can't post. Like, for instance, she has a rule that they can't post swimsuit pics. I think that's strange because people post swimsuit pics on Instagram, people post swimsuit pics on Facebook, on Twitter, and you will or you won't get gross comments. That happens. It's unfortunate. It should not happen, and I think you should block people who do that to you. and I'm not condoning them doing that to you at all, but it's kind of an inevitability. You can be a completely faceless account, like you can be an anonymous account and never post anything that has to show your physical appearance and still be creeped on. So I think telling girls that they have to stifle themselves because someone else is gross, I think that's unfair, and it's placing the blame on them. I think every young girl should be safe on the internet, but I also don't believe in placing all the heavy work onto them. Is telling them to avoid doing something instead of telling people to leave them alone. And I also think it's strange for a 20-something-year-old to tell a bunch of teenage girls what they can and cannot post. I feel like that crosses a line. Like, there's a difference between asking, like, hey, I'm kind of unsure about doing a certain thing and I was wondering if I can get your input on it, and telling them out and out there's a hard and fast rule about no swimsuit pics, which is something that has been said. That is very strange to me. There's also the fact that the Doelet tag is a lot of trauma-related images, and I just simply do not want this aesthetic to become a trauma aesthetic. I want it to be about being fun and carefree, like the way it was. And the creator of Doelet has gotten this sort of complex where, like, if you do anything that she may or may not like, she'll be very passive-aggressive, or she'll DM you. Like, for instance, at one point my URL on Tumblr was Perverted Angel as a reference to a song by Lolita and I had changed it to Bruised Violet at one point, a reference to Hole. And then after a while I decided to go back to Perverted Angel, and when I did that, she DM'd me and was like, oh, I didn't know this was you, I really like your username. But you could tell, like, it was passive aggressive. The thing about online interactions is you can tell when someone's being passive aggressive to you. And she has a very strange thing about, oh, you can't post. Well, not you can't post, but you must only view Lolita as a horror story. And I disagree with that, because Lolita is more of a drama/tragedy than a horror story. And the reason why I say that is because of the genre. I'm not saying that what happens in the story is not horrific, but it's literally the genre of the book that Nabokov gives you. Like, Lolita is not written in the same way that Carrie is, for instance. Carrie is explicitly a horror novel due to the tropes and the plot devices and the style of writing it uses. Lolita is a drama/tragedy because of the tropes, the writing style, and the writing that it uses. You see why I'm saying that? I'm not saying that it's not horrific, but I'm just saying the style that it's written in is not a horror story. And so I think you could make a story like Lolita into like an actual horror story, but it's just not the genre it's written in. And they have, I think what it is the Doelet aesthetic seems to have a lot of guilt for identifying with Dolores Hayes, and so they feel the need to justify that guilt with saying that Lolita's a horror story and you cannot post anything from the movie, or you cannot admire the aesthetics from the movie, or else you are a pedophile enabler, I think that's the word. The part about feeling guilty for identifying with Dolores does not come from me. It comes from one of my Tumblr mutuals. I will not say her name. But yeah, that's where that idea came from. And when she said that, it really made a lot of things click to me about the Doelet aesthetic. The Doelet aesthetic seems to feel guilty for identifying with the character of Dolores Hayes. And so they overcompensate by focusing only on the tragedy of her character and only on the tragedy of the story, and seem to completely ignore the happy parts of her character and the happy parts of her story. Even though the book is littered with like sad and unfortunate situations, there are still glimpses of the happiness that Dolores managed to grab onto, whether it was being in the play, hanging out with Mona, or even before Humbert even showed along, where she was just the first shot we see of Dolores Hayes, if you remove Humbert's sexualization of her, is a little girl reading a magazine that she enjoys in the grass of her mother's garden. And I feel like that is the most clear snapshot we have of Dolores Hayes as a person and not Lolita as a projection. And I feel like they feel so guilty for identifying with Dolores Hayes that they seem to latch on to her as Lolita, the tragic figure, instead of Dolores Hayes, the happy child. And I think that that's not a really healthy way to go about it, because Lolita is a very complex novel, and I feel like you can understand the fact that Humber is purposefully trying to lure you in with romanticizing it, and still understand like, oh wait, shit, this man is a fucking pedophile murderer. I think you can look at it both ways, because it's not supposed to be cut and dry. The whole point of Lolita is that it's supposed to lure you into this false sense of security. It's supposed to make you be like, oh fuck, I can't believe I'm identifying with this man. That is the whole point. And I think that they miss that. They're so caught up in overcompensating that they remove any of the complexity from the novel, and they remove any of the small glimpses of happiness of Dolores Hayes, and instead decide to focus on the trauma, which I don't think is okay. And when you focus so much on your trauma, you're so much in that echo chamber, it's hard to get out and see the positivity in things. And the Nymphet aesthetic was about seeing the positivity of reclaiming your own girlhood. And the creator of Doelet has a problem with that. I think she feels guilty for that, because she has created an environment where people feel uncomfortable with talking about the book, or appreciating the writing of the book, or appreciating the cinematography of the movie, or the costume design of the movie, that they become afraid to post these things because they think that she's going to come into their DMs or message them about it and be like, you have to take this down. And she's created an environment, I'm not gonna say it's toxic, because I feel like toxic gets thrown around too much, but she has created an environment that's now welcome and it feels extremely exclusive. She has created this very exclusive niche group when the Nymphet aesthetic was never about that. And I think that is not okay. And also the Doelet aesthetic is very focused on purity and innocence, which is not the same from how Nymphet used to be, which was just happiness and optimism and fun and girlish things or boyish things that you enjoy. And the Doelet aesthetic is so focused on purity that even within their own trauma victims only bubble, they isolate the trauma victims who may be hypersexual due to trauma, or who do not want to feel innocent, or who do not feel innocent at all. And by focusing so much on innocence and purity, they have isolated even more people inside of their own bubble that they have created, and it feels like you can't get in. The leader has created a environment where it feels like you have to talk to her to be able to get in, when it was never like that. Back in the day, Nymphet blogs used to pop up day after day after day just because people found it and was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And I just don't want to be associated with something like that. It's just not fun. It's not fun. It's not fun to constantly look over your shoulder. And that's basically why I prefer to use Coquette, because Coquette feels more open to everyone. Because even back in the day, no matter how much Tumblr user Pity Baby got praise or how big she got, she never felt like she lorded over us. She never felt like she was the creator. The creator of Doelet calls herself the patron goddess of the Doelet. She calls herself the Doelet god, and like, that's strange. It's weird. Because Joanna, as much of an ego she may have gotten, and I don't even think she got that big of an ego. She got as much of an ego as you would expect as a Tumblr famous teenage girl to have gotten. She never felt like she was telling people what to do. She was very upfront about the fact that she was a regular 16-year-old girl who just happened to get a pretty big following. And I think that the Nymphet aesthetic needs to go back to basics. It really needs to just go back to the root of why we all came here. because there's nothing wrong with admitting that you enjoy the aesthetics of the movie or the costume design, because that was the job of the movie. That's the job of any movie, to make the movie visually appealing. It's supposed to be a feast for the eyes. Movies have beautiful cinematography and beautiful costume design to amplify the viewing experience. Like, it's okay to be like, wow, this is beautiful, I love this shot, or wow, her outfits were so cute, I wish I could wear that. Because you could go out right now and buy a 40s style sewing pattern and find an exact outfit. The sailor suits, the tennis play suit, the crop top and skirt or crop top and short sets, like those are very popular style designs for girls about her age and maybe a little bit older. So I would say about early to late teens, those styles were very popular, and that movie just really put it in the forefront of, wow, everybody was dressing like that. And the movie was like, wow, look at this beautiful shot of this car coming down the road, look at the American kitschiness of the Hayes household. Like, that was the point. It was supposed to be a beautiful looking film for a beautiful novel. And I think that overwhelming guilt of enjoying the novel the way they did has tainted the community. And I personally I have not used the Doelet tag in months. Anytime I may use it, it's because I used it for a while. So, you know, when you have Tumblr tags and like the ones you use most frequently are saved at the front, like if I click too much I may accidentally use it, or if I have a queued post up, then I may use it. But I no longer use the Doelet tag because I do not want to be in an aesthetic that makes me feel guilty for enjoying this aesthetic or enjoying this movie or this book. I don't want to feel guilty for that. And I'm not saying this to say you should use the coquette aesthetic, coquette tag instead. I'm not doing that. I'm just basically saying my personal feelings and my reasons for doing this. And if you disagree, that's 100% fine. I don't care. You're not gonna beat my ass anyways. And yeah, that's basically my feelings on this. If you do ever want to check out either tag for yourself, you can always make your own opinion by looking up the Doelet tag on Tumblr and then looking up the coquette tag on Tumblr and seeing which one you feel works best for you. I will say I do encourage people to use the coquette tag more, especially if you are a girl of color. We are very pro girl of color in the coquette tag, because that's another thing I noticed about the Doelet tag, because it was very white. I was the only girl of color posting in it at the time, compared to the coquette tag, which was more diverse. So if you want to be if you want to see yourself, the coquette tag will most likely have more girls of color, and we always want more people joining, because I feel like we really just need to go back to basics. So that'll be this video. 2 videos in a row. Can you believe it? I sure can't. I'm actually supposed to be doing my homework, but I didn't want to. But yes, thank you. My links to my social media will be in the description, and yeah, that's it.